These items cost more than you'd make in a year. People like you don't belong in Elysium Beauty. We don't offer free samples or makeup tutorials for window shoppers. The store manager, Alexander Whitfield, said to Zora, the black woman in the store. The words hung in the air like poison as the security team shoved Zora through the glass doors onto the sidewalk. One final push sent her stumbling forward, but she caught herself, straightened her back, and smoothed her sweater. Soon, the crowd at Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics fell silent as two burly security guards gripped Zora Phoenix by her arms, practically lifting her designer flats off the polished marble floor. Despite the humiliation burning through her veins, Zora's face remained a portrait of dignity. Her eyes, focused straight ahead, her jaw clenched but composed. She didn't struggle. She didn't scream. That wasn't who Zora Phoenix was. The security guards' fingers dug into the sleeves of her cashmere sweater as they marched her toward the exit, past gleaming display cases of luxury skincare and makeup. Customers stepped back, creating a pathway of shame. Some averted their eyes, unconcerned with what had happened. Others pulled out their phones, recording what would soon become the biggest mistake of Elysium's history. Alexander Whitfield, the store manager, followed behind them with his arms crossed and a smug expression plastered across his face. His voice cut through the hushed whispers of onlookers. Without turning around, without giving them the satisfaction of seeing a single tear, Zora reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Her fingers, adorned with a wedding band worth more than Alexander's annual salary, dialed a number she knew by heart. "Ethan." Her voice steady but tight. "You won't believe what just happened," she said to her billionaire husband. What the staff at Elysium Beauty didn't know, what Alexander Whitfield couldn't have guessed as he watched her through the glass with a dismissive sneer, was who Zora Phoenix really was. And who her husband was about to become, their worst nightmare. Have you ever been discriminated against? Share your experience, type justice, and tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Because this story has the best karma you've ever heard. Behind every moment of public humiliation lies a story. If Alexander Whitfield had known who Zora Phoenix truly was, he might have thought twice before having security drag her from Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics. Zora Phoenix wasn't born into wealth. The daughter of Haitian immigrants who arrived in America with nothing but hope and determination, Zora grew up in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Her father worked double shifts as a taxi driver, while her mother cleaned hotel rooms, both sacrificing everything to give their daughter opportunities they never had. Zora graduated top of her class, earned a full scholarship to Columbia University, and later completed her MBA at Harvard Business School. What made Zora exceptional wasn't just her business acumen, but her character. In an industry obsessed with status, she remained refreshingly genuine. No matter how successful she became, she never forgot where she came from. Soon, she met Ethan Reynolds at a charity gala. While others approached the black tech billionaire with transparent agendas, Zora hardly noticed him. She was too busy ensuring the event ran smoothly. It was her indifference to his wealth that first caught his attention. Their courtship was private, their wedding intimate. When they married 3 years ago, Zora insisted on keeping her last name professionally. "My parents gave me this name," she explained. "It carries their journey, their sacrifices. I won't let it disappear." Though married to one of the wealthiest men in America, Zora maintained her own identity. She didn't flaunt designer logos or travel with an entourage. Her wealth was evident only in the confidence with which she moved through the world and the generosity she showed to others. The day she walked into Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics, Zora wasn't thinking about her net worth or her husband's empire. She was simply looking for skincare products before attending a gala night that evening, a $50,000 per plate dinner she had organized. She entered the store dressed in simple yet quality clothing. Dark jeans, a cashmere sweater, minimal jewelry. No logos, no flash. Just a woman with the quiet assurance of someone who has nothing to prove. Little did Alexander Whitfield know that the woman he was about to humiliate could have purchased not just everything in his store, but the entire building it stood in. The wedding band on her finger, the only expensive item she wore that day, was worth more than his 5 years' annual salary. The morning had begun like any other for Zora Phoenix. The September sunlight filtered through their Central Park West penthouse, painting golden stripes across their minimalist bedroom. While many would assume that a billionaire's wife would sleep late, surrounded by luxury, Zora had risen at precisely 6:15 a.m. "You're sure you don't want Marceline to pick up your skincare for tonight?" Ethan had asked, referring to their household manager who typically handled such errands. Zora had smiled, squeezing his hand. "I prefer to select these things myself. You know how particular I am about ingredients." It was true. Growing up watching her mother develop painful rashes from cheap drugstore products had made Zora meticulous about what she put on her skin. Now that she could afford the best, she researched everything thoroughly, often engaging directly with the chemists and formulators behind luxury brands. After kissing Ethan goodbye and making a quick call to check on her latest project, Zora had dressed thoughtfully in what she called her everyday uniform. Her premium dark-washed jeans and her cream cashmere sweater, though lacking obvious logos. Her simple but expensive $10,000 leather flats were handcrafted in Italy, designed for both elegance and comfort. Zora's natural hair was styled in a sleek, protective updo. Her makeup was minimal but flawless. By 11:30 a.m., Zora's town car had dropped her off in front of Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics on 5th Avenue. She'd waved off her driver, telling him she'd call when she was ready to be picked up. "Take your lunch break, Thomas," she'd insisted. "I'll be here for at least an hour." The storefront of Elysium Beauty was an architectural marvel of glass and brushed gold, designed by a renowned Japanese minimalist. A doorman in a tailored black suit opened the door rudely for Zora, his eyes not meeting hers, the first subtle indication of what was to come. The interior was a temple to luxury. Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and glass display cases that made every product appear as precious as museum artifacts. Sales associates in crisp black uniforms floated between displays, offering personalized assistance to customers. Each carried an iPad in a custom leather case, ready to access client profiles, previous purchases, and skin analysis data. The store hummed with the quiet murmur of exclusive commerce, a world where price tags were rarely displayed and the question, "how much?" was considered slightly vulgar. Zora stood just inside the entrance, taking in the scene with appreciation for the aesthetic, but without the wide-eyed wonder that might mark a first-time visitor. She'd been to Elysium several times before, though usually at their Miami location. The New York flagship was larger. For several minutes, Zora waited to be acknowledged. 3 white women entered after her. The first, a slender blonde in her 50s wearing a Chanel tweed jacket and carrying a crocodile Birkin bag, was immediately greeted by name. "Mrs. Vanderholt. Wonderful to see you again. Your limited edition order has arrived. Shall we open some champagne while you browse?" The second woman, younger, with a tennis-toned body and carefully maintained auburn hair, was whisked away to the VIP consultation area, a secluded place with velvet seating and personalized lighting designed to showcase how products would look in various settings. The third, a 20-something with platinum blonde hair and a fur coat, despite the mild September weather, barely made it through the door before a sales associate practically sprinted across the floor to assist her. "Are you looking for something special today?" the associate gushed. "We've just received the Lauren collection that's been all over Instagram. Not a single associate made eye contact with Zora. If this treatment bothered her, her face didn't show it. She moved deeper into the store, past the entry-level products, mere $100 moisturizers and $80 cleansers, toward the rear where the truly exclusive items were displayed. Here was the collection she'd researched extensively. The collection was housed in hand-blown glass containers with stoppers made from sustainably harvested pearls. The entire 6-piece collection was priced at $5,000 and limited to 100 sets worldwide. Zora examined the ingredient list with genuine interest. She was carefully reading about the rare botanical extracts when she felt a presence behind her. Not the helpful hovering of an eager sales associate, but something colder, more intrusive. She turned to find a tall man with meticulously styled silver hair and a bespoke suit that fit his slender frame perfectly. His eyes were an icy blue that assessed her with immediate disapproval. His name tag, smaller and more discreet than those worn by regular staff, read Alexander Whitfield, General Manager. His lips formed what technically qualified as a smile, though it never reached his eyes. "Can I help you find the exit?" he asked. "This isn't a museum for sightseers." The implication was clear as crystal, as clear as the display cases surrounding them. Zora didn't belong among Elysium's customers. She was an interloper, a tourist, someone who should be gawking from outside the windows rather than touching the precious merchandise. "Actually," Zora replied, her voice measured and melodic, "I'm interested in purchasing this collection. I have an event this evening and wanted to try their new illuminating serum." Alexander's eyes narrowed, scanning her from head to toe, lingering disapprovingly on her simple clothing. His gaze paused briefly on her wedding band, perhaps the only item that gave him momentary pause, before dismissing it, possibly as a well-crafted fake. "These products require a significant investment," he said, emphasizing the word significant, as though speaking to a child who couldn't grasp the concept of large numbers. "Do you have proof of income? ID? How do I know you can afford these products? We've had issues with certain people coming in just to handle luxury items with no intention to purchase, and you look like one of them." The term "certain people" hung in the air, loaded with prejudice. The absurdity of the request might have made Zora laugh under different circumstances. In her 15 years of shopping at luxury establishments around the world, from Hermès in Paris to Bulgari in Milan to Tokyo, she had never once been asked to prove her ability to pay before even touching a product. "I don't typically carry income statements when I shop," Zora replied, the slightest edge creeping into her voice despite her determination to remain composed. "Nor do I believe your other customers are required to present financial documentation before making a purchase." She gestured discreetly toward the VIP area, where the auburn-haired woman was now having champagne poured while trying moisturizer samples. "I haven't noticed you asking anyone else for their banking details today." Alexander's expression hardened, his fake politeness cracking to reveal contempt beneath. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but increasing its venom. "Listen," he said, "these items cost more than you'd make in a year. Are you just here looking for handouts or Instagram photos? Because we're not a backdrop for your social media fantasies." His eyes flicked to her phone, visible in the pocket of her jeans. "Let me guess. You want to take selfies with products you can't afford to impress your followers? Or maybe you're hoping for free samples? We don't do handouts here. And we don't serve broke people like you." Each word was a deliberate cut, designed to make her feel small, to remind her that in his eyes she didn't belong in this space regardless of what she might actually be able to afford. The store had grown quieter. Other customers were watching now, some with uncomfortable expressions, others with the satisfaction of witnessing someone they deemed an outsider being put in their place. Zora remained composed, though something flickered in her dark eyes. Not fear, but a quiet assessment, as though she were taking mental notes for future reference. Her mind raced through options. Leave quietly, demand to speak to ownership, make a scene that would surely end up on social media, or simply purchase the items and prove him wrong. But there was a principle at stake. Why should she have to prove herself worthy of basic respect? Actually, she said, her voice calm but carrying clearly in the now hushed store, I was planning to purchase the entire limited edition collection. All 6 products, totaling, she paused, doing the mental calculation, just over $20,000 with tax. Alexander laughed, not a genuine laugh of amusement, but the cruel chuckle of someone who believes they've caught another in a lie. His eyes crinkled with malicious delight as he made a performance of looking around the store. Of course you were, he said, his voice loud enough for others to hear, designed to make her the punchline of a joke everyone was in on, except her. He raised his hand, beckoning to security. We have someone causing a disturbance. Another broke tourist wasting our time. Soon, 2 security guards approached from positions near the exits, both over 6 feet tall with black suits and earpieces. They moved towards them, converging on Zora from different angles, as though she might be a threat rather than a potential customer. Please don't touch me, Zora said firmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and executive decisions. I'll leave on my own. But they weren't interested in dignity. Each took one of her arms, lifting her slightly so her feet barely touched the floor as they marched her toward the exit. The humiliation was calculated, designed to be as public and degrading as possible. A spectacle and a warning to anyone else who might enter the store without fitting Alexander Whitfield's vision of who belonged. As they pushed Zora through the doors onto Fifth Avenue, she stumbled slightly, but quickly regained her balance. With deliberate calmness, Zora straightened her sweater, smoothed a non-existent wrinkle from her jeans, took a deep breath, and lifted her shoulders back to perfect posture. Only then did she reach for her phone. Behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, Alexander and his staff watched as she dialed, perhaps expecting her to call a taxi or a friend to pick her up after such embarrassment. Perhaps they expected tears, a breakdown, or an angry tirade directed at the store. Zora gave them none of these satisfactions. Ethan, she said on the call to her husband, her voice shaking from the humiliation. Not of fear or humiliation, but of the controlled anger of someone who has witnessed injustice and is already calculating how to address it. I'm fine. Just shaken. No, don't do anything rash. She listened for a moment, then glanced back at the store where Alexander still watched, arms crossed smugly across his chest, an emperor overseeing the banishment of someone he deemed unworthy of his realm. I know you want to help, Zora continued into the phone, turning to pace slowly in front of the store. But I need to handle this my way. She listened again, nodding slightly. Yes, darling, Elysium Beauty on Fifth Avenue, the flagship store. The manager's name is Alexander Whitfield. We'll discuss it when I get home. I'm going to walk for a bit, clear my head. I'll have Thomas pick me up at the cafe on 57th. A softer tone entered her voice. What Alexander Whitfield couldn't hear, what he couldn't possibly know as he smirked at the woman he'd just humiliated, was that on the other end of that call was Ethan Reynolds, a man whose net worth exceeded the GDP of several small nations, a man whose love for his wife was matched only by his intolerance for injustice. As Zora walked away from Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics, her steps measured and her head held high, Alexander Whitfield returned to his office, congratulating himself on maintaining the exclusivity of his domain. He had no way of knowing that he had just set in motion a chain of events that would teach him exactly what it costs to judge a book by its cover. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button now and share with others to enjoy more of these stories. The private elevator opened directly into the penthouse apartment. The Reynolds residence existed in a world far removed from the humiliation Zora had experienced hours earlier. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured the city skyline, while minimalist furnishings in warm neutrals created a home that was luxurious without being ostentatious. As Zora stepped into their living room, she found Ethan pacing, his phone to his ear, his free hand gesturing emphatically. At 38, Ethan Reynolds cut an impressive figure, 6'2", with the lean build of someone who made time for pre-dawn workouts despite running a global tech empire. "I don't care what their quarterly projections are," he was saying, his voice controlled but vibrating with intensity. "I want the store-bought within the hour." He ended the call when he saw Zora, crossing the room in 4 long strides to embrace her. These weren't the actions of a billionaire tech mogul known for disrupting industries. These were the movements of a husband seeing his wife in pain. "I've already got my team looking into Elysium's corporate structure," he said, his hands gently framing her face. "Thomas called me immediately after dropping you off. He saw everything through the window." Zora sighed, placing her hands over his. "They kicked me out of the store, Ethan. They humiliated me. In public, because of the color of my skin." Each sentence was clipped, precise. "It's not the first time I've experienced discrimination," Zora said, moving to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. "And unfortunately, it won't be the last." "But it should be," Ethan insisted, following her. "That's the point. We have the resources to do something about it." Their dynamic in this moment revealed everything about their relationship. There was no power imbalance, no billionaire husband dictating to his wife. They moved through their shared space as equals, each respecting the other's perspective while holding their own ground. "I will make that manager pay for his prejudice," Ethan said. "This is about accountability. This is about justice. This isn't just about you, Zora. How many others have they humiliated who don't have our resources, who don't have a voice, who just have to swallow that humiliation and walk away?" The question hung in the air between them. Zora's eyes softened as she recognized the deeper wound being exposed. This wasn't just about her experience at Elysium Beauty. This was about the 14-year-old Ethan being followed by security guards in department stores. This was about his mother being asked if she could afford the groceries in her cart. This was about generational pain that money couldn't erase. "What exactly are you planning?" Zora asked, watching Ethan's face carefully. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and took the call. "Talk to me, Marcus," he said, putting the call on speaker out of respect for his wife. "We've got a clear picture of their corporate structure," said the voice of his chief legal counsel. "Elysium Beauty is owned by Pinnacle Luxury Group. They're publicly traded but tightly controlled. There's a vulnerability, though. Their stock took a hit last quarter. We could acquire a controlling interest within days if we move aggressively." Ethan's eyes met Zora's. "How quickly?" "If we start tonight, we could have majority ownership before they open tomorrow morning. The board won't know what hit them." "Do it," Ethan said, his voice resolute. "And Marcus, I want complete discretion. No one knows we're behind this until I say so." As he ended the call, Zora's expression revealed her conflicted feelings. She understood the impulse, the desire to create consequences for injustice, but something troubled her about the approach. Buying a company just to punish one manager seems excessive, she said carefully. Ethan took her hands in his. "This isn't about punishment, Zora. This is about transformation. That store, that entire chain exists in a bubble of exclusion and elitism. They've built their brand on making people feel unworthy. They need to pay." Zora considered his words, her analytical mind already processing possibilities. "You're not talking about destroying the brand? You're taking over and will make it better?" "Exactly," Ethan said, his passion evident. "We will fire all those who discriminated against you while employing someone better in its place." Soon, Alexander Whitfield would learn that the woman he had dismissed so casually was now, effectively, his boss. And that was just the beginning. Do you think buying out the store and taking ownership was the best decision? If you were in their shoes, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments and click the subscribe button now, the next day in the store. The usual parade of wealth and privilege. Tourists with shopping bags, executives hurrying to meetings, the everyday theater of Manhattan's most prestigious shopping district. But today, something different was about to unfold. Something that would soon become the stuff of retail legend, whispered about in break rooms and executive suites throughout the luxury industry for years to come. At precisely 9:58 a.m., 2 minutes before Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics was scheduled to open, traffic on the busy avenue seemed to pause. Heads turned as a gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb. Not just any Phantom. This was the extended model in anthracite with mandarin leather interior, a vehicle so exclusive that a year's waiting list was considered expedited delivery. The uniformed driver, the same Thomas who had watched Zora's humiliation the day before, emerged with military precision to open the rear door. Before the gathered staff could process this arrival, a second identical Rolls-Royce pulled up behind the first. Same model, same color. This wasn't just an arrival, this was a statement. From the first vehicle emerged Zora Phoenix. Gone was yesterday's casual attire. Today, she wore a precisely tailored white pantsuit that seemed to capture and reflect the morning light. Her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo, accented with a single gold pin. No flashy jewelry, no obvious designer logos, just the unmistakable confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. A tourist nearby raised his phone to capture a photo, assuming she must be a celebrity. In many ways, he wasn't wrong. From the second Rolls-Royce stepped Ethan Reynolds. His charcoal suit was custom-made, but deliberately understated, his presence commanding without being showy. The power couple stood for a moment on the sidewalk, a tableau of quiet authority that stopped pedestrians in their tracks. Behind them, 4 black Escalades pulled up in perfect synchronization, forming a protective semicircle around the Rolls-Royces. From these emerged 12 individuals in business attire. Men and women with the focused expressions of people who closed billion-dollar deals before breakfast. Each carried a sleek leather portfolio embossed with the Reynolds Technologies logo. This wasn't a shopping trip. This was an operation. Inside Elysium Beauty, the staff had congregated near the windows, watching this procession with growing unease. The store wasn't scheduled to open for another 2 minutes, but several employees were already on the sales floor, pretending to adjust displays while stealing glances at the assembly outside. "Is that?" whispered one associate to another, her eyes wide. "It can't be," replied her colleague. "Why would Ethan Reynolds come here?" Yesterday's video of Zora being escorted out had circulated among employees overnight through a group chat, along with whispers about who she might really be. Some had dismissed the rumors as exaggeration. Others had spent sleepless nights worrying about potential fallout. Now, watching the unmistakable figure of the tech billionaire approach their doors, those fears were crystallizing into certainty. Alexander Whitfield emerged from his office, alerted by the commotion. He straightened his tie and plastered on the practiced smile he reserved for VIP clients, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes but served to convey the exclusivity of Elysium Beauty. He'd dealt with celebrities and business titans before. This was his domain, and he was determined to maintain control. "Places everyone," he instructed crisply. "Whoever they are, they're still customers." A young sales associate, Bethany, approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Whitfield, I think that might be Mr. Ethan, the billionaire." "I know exactly who that is," he cut her off, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Now get to your station." As the doors opened precisely at 10 a.m., Zora entered first. her steps measured and deliberate. The click of her heels on the marble floor echoed through the suddenly silent store. Behind her came Ethan, his expression unreadable. And then the procession of business professionals who spread out with practiced efficiency, taking positions throughout the store like chess pieces being strategically placed. Alexander's coffee cup crashed to the floor. "No," he whispered, the blood draining from his face. "No, it can't be." But it was. And as the entourage of serious-looking executives in tailored suits followed behind them, Alexander began to shake visibly. The woman he'd humiliated and thrown out yesterday wasn't just any customer. She was Zora Phoenix, wife of Ethan Reynolds. "She can't be," he stammered to his assistant. "She was dressed like nobody. She didn't look like a rich person." Sweat beaded on his forehead as he hurried to the door to greet them, his mind racing through ways to save the situation, to save his job. The doors opened. Alexander forced his most ingratiating smile. "Welcome to Elysium Beauty," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "It's an honor to have you with us today, Mr. Reynolds." Alexander stepped forward with his hand extended, moving to intercept them before they reached the main floor. "Welcome back to Elysium Beauty," he said, his voice pitched to convey warmth he didn't feel. "How may we assist you today?" The recognition was there in his eyes. This was the woman he'd had security remove yesterday. But now, surrounded by an entourage that screamed wealth and power, he was recalculating rapidly, his mind desperately trying to fit these new pieces into a worldview that was crumbling by the second. Zora did not take his hand. She simply regarded him with the same dignity she'd maintained even as his security team had marched her out. Her gaze was neither angry nor triumphant, just calmly appraising, like someone evaluating a property they were considering purchasing. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably, forcing Alexander to lower his hand awkwardly. Ethan stepped forward, his presence filling the space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with authority. When he spoke, it was in the measured tone of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. People leaned in to listen. "I believe you met my wife yesterday," he said, his voice controlled, but with an undercurrent of steel that made several sales associates physically step back. Alexander's smile faltered, his eyes darting between them as the implications sank in. The floor beneath him seemed to shift, as though the literal and figurative foundations of his world were suddenly unreliable. "Mrs. Reynolds?" he stammered, his face draining of color so rapidly it was as if someone had pulled a plug. "I had no idea. We would have, of course, extended our premier client services had we known." A murmur rippled through the staff. Several pulled out their phones, checking social media profiles, connecting dots they should have connected yesterday. One whispered to another, "That's why her ring looked so expensive." The security guard who had physically removed Zora the previous day, Kendrick, according to his name badge, emerged from the back room, stopping dead when he recognized her. His expression transformed from professional neutrality to naked fear in an instant. He had handled many challenging situations in his security career, but never one with stakes this high. "Mr. Whitfield," he said urgently, approaching Alexander. "There's something you should know." "Not now, Kendrick," Alexander hissed, still trying to recover his composure, to find some way to navigate out of the catastrophe he sensed was unfolding. "The point," Ethan continued, addressing everyone now, his voice carrying to every corner of the store, "is that yesterday, my wife was discriminated against in this establishment because of her race. She was publicly humiliated, physically manhandled, and escorted out of a store where she intended to spend over $20,000. He paused, letting the amount sink in. Several sales associates exchanged alarmed glances. That kind of sale would have been among the largest of the month, with commissions that could have paid a significant portion of their rent in Manhattan's punishing real estate market. But we're not here to spend money today, Ethan continued, removing his sunglasses and tucking them into his breast pocket. We're here for something else entirely. The tension in the room was palpable now. A water glass shattered as a nervous employee knocked it off a counter, the sound like a gunshot in the hushed space. Ethan nodded to one of his team members, a sharp-featured woman with close-cropped silver hair. She stepped forward and handed Alexander a folder with the Reynolds Holdings logo embossed on its cover. "What's this?" Alexander asked, his attempt at authority undermined by the slight tremor in his hands as he accepted the document. A drop of sweat traced a path from his temple down his jawline. "Ownership transfer papers," Ethan said simply. As of 4:30 this morning, Reynolds Holdings acquired a controlling interest in Pinnacle Luxury Group, the parent company of Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics. The room froze. Even the ambient music that had been playing softly in the background seemed to pause in shock. Alexander's mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. He flipped through the documents with trembling fingers, scanning legal language that confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't a prank or an empty threat. This was a corporate takeover executed with military precision. That's impossible," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper before strengthening with desperation. "Elysium has 50 stores worldwide. The brand is valued at over $1 billion. The board would never—" "The board wasn't given a choice," interrupted the silver-haired woman. "We acquired 63% of outstanding shares through a series of transactions executed overnight. The board was notified 30 minutes ago." Ethan's smile contained no warmth. "I could have bought 500 stores, Mr. Whitfield. Your entire company represents less than 2% of my net worth." The implications of this statement rippled through the room. The staff were no longer looking at a customer they might impress or dismiss. They were looking at their new owner, an owner who had witnessed their behavior firsthand. An employee near the back began quietly crying, while a third edged toward the exit before being intercepted by one of Ethan's team members. No one was leaving. Not yet. "Now," Ethan said, checking his watch, "not an ostentatious timepiece, but a simple, elegant design that likely cost more than most of the staff earned in a year. I believe the store opens to the public in exactly 1 minute. Before that happens, I need everyone to gather around. We're having an emergency meeting." As if choreographed, Ethan's team spread throughout the store, gently but firmly directing all employees toward the center of the main floor. There was no resistance. The shock was too complete, the display of power too overwhelming. Sales associates, stock personnel, security, everyone formed a nervous semicircle around Ethan and Zora. Alexander stood frozen in place, the folder clutched in his hands, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. Yesterday, he had exercised what he believed was his authority to remove an unwelcome presence from his exclusive domain. Today, he was discovering that the woman he had dismissed so casually now effectively owned everything around him, including his career. Zora's expression remained neutral, but those who looked closely might have noticed the slight lift at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile of triumph, but the quiet satisfaction of justice about to be served. As the staff gathered in their nervous semicircle, the atmosphere in Elysium Beauty and Cosmetics had transformed completely. The temple of exclusivity was about to be remade, and not a single luxury item would be sold today. Instead, something far more valuable was about to be exchanged. A lesson in humility, consequences, and the true meaning of power. Ethan placed his hand gently on the small of Zora's back, not possessively but supportively, a gesture that spoke volumes about their relationship. This wasn't a husband acting alone. This was a partnership, a united front, facing injustice together. "Let me be clear about something," Ethan said, his voice carrying throughout the now silent store. "What's about to happen isn't just about yesterday's incident. It's about a pattern of behavior that ends today." Alexander's face had gone from pale to gray. The realization that not only was he in trouble for how he'd treated the wife of a billionaire, but that billionaire now owned the company, caused him to sway on his feet. "You're fired, effective immediately," Ethan stated, the words landing like a death sentence. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." "No, please," Alexander begged, all pretense of dignity gone. "This store is my life. I've been here 12 years. Zora, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. 12 years of judging people by their appearance rather than their character. 12 years of deciding who belongs and who doesn't based on your prejudices. Alexander looked frantically around the room, seeking allies, finding none. The same staff who had followed his example yesterday now avoided his gaze, already calculating their own survival in this new reality. The front doors were locked by one of Ethan's team members. The blinds lowered electronically, casting the store in a more subdued light. Outside, confused customers began to gather, peering through the gaps in the blinds at the unusual scene unfolding inside. Alexander Whitfield, who had built his career on making others feel small, suddenly understood what it felt like to lose all power in an instant. He had judged Zora by her appearance and found her wanting. Now he would be judged by his actions, and the verdict was already written on the faces of everyone around him. The reckoning had arrived. The gleaming main floor of Elysium Beauty had been transformed in minutes. Display cases were pushed aside, making room for rows of chairs where confused employees now sat. At the front, Ethan's team had set up a large projection screen and a podium. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a tribunal. Alexander sat in the front row, his earlier confidence shattered, his face ashen. Though no longer store manager, he'd been instructed to remain for what was to come. Occasionally, he glanced at the exit, but two security personnel, Ethan's security, not his, stood watch. There would be no escape from what was about to unfold. Ethan stepped to the podium, his expression grave. No longer the enraged husband, he now embodied the calculated precision of a CEO who had built an empire by seeing problems others missed and fixing them decisively. "For those who don't know me, I'm Ethan Reynolds. As of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Luxury Group, which makes me your new boss. But before we discuss the future, we need to address the past." He nodded to a member of his team, who dimmed the lights and started a presentation. On screen appeared a series of graphs and charts, customer demographic data from Elysium's 50 locations worldwide. "My team spent the night analyzing your customer data. What we found was disturbing. Despite operating in diverse cities around the world, Elysium's customer base is 92% white. But that's not the result of natural market forces." The screen changed to show security footage, carefully selected clips from stores across the country. In each, the pattern was identical. White customers greeted warmly, customers of color ignored or followed suspiciously. "This isn't coincidence," Ethan continued. "It's a policy, unwritten but systematically enforced through hiring, training, and leadership examples." Then came the footage from yesterday. The entire store watched as Zora entered Elysium, was deliberately ignored, and then approached by Alexander. Every dismissive comment, every contemptuous look, played out in high definition. When it reached the moment security physically removed her, audible gasps filled the room. Throughout the screening, Zora stood beside Ethan, her posture perfect, her expression dignified. She wasn't hiding from the humiliation, she was reclaiming the narrative. When the lights came up, Alexander was shaking, his forehead beaded with sweat. "It was a misunderstanding," he stammered, rising to his feet. "We get so many people who just come in to take pictures and never buy anything. We have to protect our brand exclusivity." Brand exclusivity, Ethan repeated, his voice cold. Let's talk about what that really means at Elysium. Let's hear from your other victims. At his signal, the doors opened. 5 individuals entered. Different ages, different backgrounds, but all people of color. They took seats on a panel at the front, facing the employees. A distinguished older black woman spoke first. I'm Dr. Eleanor Jenkins, Chief of Neurosurgery at Mount Sinai. 3 months ago, I came to purchase gifts for my surgical team. I was told items were probably out of my price range and that there was a more affordable shop down the street. Next, a young South Asian man in a tailored suit. Raj Patel, hedge fund manager. I was followed by security during my entire visit last month, despite spending over $30,000 on gifts for clients. A Latina woman, elegant in her 50s. Maria Gonzalez, State Supreme Court judge. I was asked if I was looking for the employee entrance. With each testimony, the employees' expressions changed from shock to shame. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was systemic. But Ethan wasn't finished. 3 more people entered. Former Elysium employees who had left or been fired after raising concerns about discriminatory practices. I was told to prioritize customers who look like they can afford our products, said one former sales associate. The training never explicitly mentioned race, but the examples made it clear who was considered priority. Another testified, I received lower commissions because I was assigned to help customers. My manager didn't think would make large purchases, almost always people of color. As the testimonials continued, Alexander seemed to physically shrink in his chair. When it was his turn to respond, his arrogance had dissolved completely. Please, he begged, voice cracking. I have a family to support, a mortgage, children in private school. Ethan's response was measured but relentless. So did many qualified applicants you rejected based on their skin color. People with degrees, experience, and talent who never got past the interview because they didn't fit your brand image. Your family won't suffer. Unlike the families of those you've discriminated against, they'll simply have to adjust to a lifestyle built on years of systematic exclusion coming to an end. He turned to address the entire staff, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. Effective immediately, Elysium Beauty is closed worldwide for restructuring. All 50 locations will shut down as of noon today. Panic rippled through the room. A senior sales associate, Veronica, according to her name tag, rushed forward. You can't do this, she cried. I've been with Elysium for 7 years. I have sales goals, clients who rely on me. Did Mrs. Harrington rely on you yesterday? Ethan asked quietly. When you rushed to serve her while ignoring my wife, your employment record shows a clear pattern of selective service. Veronica turned to Zora, desperation in her eyes. Please. I didn't know who you were. And that was the moment Zora finally spoke, her voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the room more effectively than any shout could have. That's precisely the problem, she said, stepping forward. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic dignity. You judged me by my appearance, not my character. That's a mistake you only get to make once. She surveyed the room, making eye contact with each employee. Some of you will have the opportunity to reapply after our restructuring. Those who treated all customers with respect, regardless of their perceived status, may find a place in the new organization. The rest of you will receive 2 weeks severance. Consider it time to reflect on how you want to show up in the world going forward. As security began escorting shell-shocked employees out, Ethan's team distributed envelopes containing termination papers and severance information. The precision of the operation made it clear this wasn't an impulsive reaction. This had been meticulously planned overnight. Alexander remained frozen in his seat, the last vestige of his power and privilege stripped away in less than an hour. The store that had been his kingdom now felt like a prison, with each luxury item a testament to the exclusive world he had helped build. and would now be excluded from. This isn't just about one bad day or one bad manager, Ethan said as the room emptied. This is about dismantling a culture built on exclusion and rebuilding something better in its place. As the last employees filed out, Zora stood in the center of the empty store, surrounded by products designed to enhance beauty, while the company's practices had been profoundly ugly. The transformation had begun, and in the luxury retail world, nothing would ever be quite the same. 6 months can change everything. The same Fifth Avenue storefront that had been Elysium Beauty was transformed, inside and out. Gone were the intimidating glass barriers and exclusive atmosphere. In their place stood a welcoming facade with a new name emblazoned in elegant gold lettering. Legacy. The store had been rebranded. The grand reopening drew crowds that stretched for blocks. Fashion magazines, business publications, and social media influencers jostled for position as the doors prepared to open. This wasn't just another luxury store launch. This was a revolution in the making. Standing at the center of it all was Zora Phoenix. No longer the customer who had been humiliated and removed, but the newly appointed creative director of the entire legacy brand. Her vision had reshaped not just one store, but all 50 locations worldwide. We're creating something that has never existed before, Zora explained to the assembled press. Luxury without exclusion. Exceptional quality available to anyone who values it, regardless of how they look or what assumptions others might make about them. The ribbon cutting revealed an interior that maintained the beauty of fine craftsmanship while eliminating the intimidation factor. Display cases were accessible rather than fortress-like. Price tags were clearly visible, still eye-watering amounts for luxury items, but no longer hidden as if discussing cost was vulgar. And most strikingly, the staff reflected the diversity of the city itself. The team behind the counters and on the sales floor included people of all backgrounds, ages, and body types, a stark contrast to the homogeneous staff of the former Elysium. Each wore a name tag that included not just their name, but the languages they spoke, creating immediate connection points for international customers. Meanwhile, across town in a discount cosmetics chain, a very different scene was unfolding. Alexander Whitfield, once the imperious manager of Elysium's flagship store, now wore the red vest of Value Beauty. His customer of the moment, a young black woman asking detailed questions about foundation shades. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his once haughty voice now carefully deferential. "We have 16 shades designed for deeper skin tones. Would you like to try some samples?" The irony wasn't lost on anyone familiar with his story, which had become a cautionary tale throughout the retail industry. From gatekeeper of luxury to service provider for the masses, a transition made necessary by the fact that no high-end retailer would touch his resume after what had happened at Elysium. Back at Legacy, the transformation went far deeper than aesthetics. In the training room behind the main floor, new employees participated in a comprehensive program on unconscious bias, led by Zora herself. Luxury has traditionally been defined by exclusion, she explained to the attentive group. The value was created by keeping people out. We're flipping that model. Our luxury is defined by inclusion, by creating exceptional experiences for every client who walks through those doors. The training wasn't superficial. It included role-playing scenarios, data analysis of service patterns, and personal reflection. Every employee, from stock clerks to senior management, went through the same process. "We don't expect perfection," Zora told them. "We expect awareness and growth." In his office overlooking the store floor, Ethan Reynolds sat for a rare interview about the brand's transformation. "Legacy isn't just a name," he explained, gesturing to the activity below. "It's about what we leave behind. Every business makes an imprint on society. For too long, luxury retail has reinforced harmful hierarchies and exclusion. We're demonstrating that there's another way, one that's not just more ethical, but more profitable. The financial reports backed his claim. In just 6 months, Legacy had exceeded the former Elysium's sales figures by 34%. The customer base had diversified dramatically while still maintaining the high-end shoppers who had previously frequented the store. With the Reynolds backing, Legacy had become the first Black-owned global luxury retail chain in history, a fact that made headlines in the business world and sent shockwaves through an industry that had operated on unchanged principles for decades. Perhaps most significant was the launch of the Legacy New Designers Initiative. In a dedicated studio space above the flagship store, Zora personally mentored 10 designers from underprivileged backgrounds each year, providing resources, business training, and eventually a platform to sell their creations. Talent exists everywhere, she explained. Opportunity doesn't. We're bridging that gap. Among the first cohort was Bethany, the former Elysium employee who had tried to intervene when Zora was being removed. Her small collection of handcrafted skincare products based on her Jamaican grandmother's recipes now occupied a special display near the entrance. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, a young woman entered Legacy. Her clothes were simple but neat, her manner hesitant as she looked around at the luxury surroundings. In the old days, she might have been ignored or followed suspiciously. Instead, she was greeted warmly by staff who made no assumptions about her ability to purchase. As she lingered by a display of skincare products, visibly calculating whether she could afford them, Zora approached, not as the creative director, but as someone who recognized a younger version of herself. "That serum changed my life," she said, pointing to the product the young woman was considering. "I'd be happy to give you a sample to try before you decide." The conversation that followed wasn't about making a sale. It was about connection, about seeing someone fully. Before the young woman left, Zora handed her a brochure for the New Designers Initiative. "You mentioned you're studying chemistry," she said. "We're looking for formulators with fresh perspectives. Think about applying." As the store prepared to close that evening, Zora gathered the staff for their daily reflection, a practice she had instituted from day one. "True luxury isn't what you own," she told them, her words becoming the unofficial mantra of the brand. "It's creating space for everyone to shine." Today, how did you help someone shine? The legacy of that one moment of discrimination had become something no one could have predicted. A complete reimagining of what luxury could be in the modern world. The statistics told the story that traditional retail had claimed was impossible. Legacy's workforce was now 73% people of color, with 68% of management positions held by women and minorities. Employee satisfaction scores were 92% positive. Customer demographics had expanded to reflect the actual population of the cities where stores operated. Most telling of all, revenues were up across all metrics, proving that inclusion wasn't just right. It was smart business. The luxury retail industry was being forced to follow suit, with competing brands scrambling to diversify their staff and rethink exclusionary practices. What had begun as one woman being judged by her appearance had catalyzed a movement that was reshaping an entire industry. All because Zora Phoenix and Ethan Reynolds understood that sometimes justice isn't just about consequences for wrongdoing. It's about creating something better from the ashes of what was wrong. If you love the story, like, subscribe, and share to others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.